Hey, everybody, I'm S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 39 interview. We'll be talking with MD New and discussing his latest work. Let's get to know our guest. MD New is an inclusive, international award winning gay fiction writer with a love for writing and travel. Living in the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose, California, and growing up around technology, he's always been fascinated with what could be. Specifically drawn to sci fi and paranormal television and novels, MD New was inspired by the great Gene Roddenberry, George Lucas, Stephen King, Alice Walker, Alfred Hitchcock, Harvey Fierstein, Anne Rice, and Kim Stanley Robinson. An odd combination, but one that has influenced his writing. Growing up in an accepting family as a gay man, he always wondered why there were never stories reflecting who he was, constantly surrounded by characters that only reflected boy, I struggle on the straight. I reflected heterosexual society. MD knew, decided he wanted to change that. So he took to writing, wanting to tell good stories that reflected our diverse world. When MD New isn't writing his work, he works for a nonprofit and travels with his biggest supporter and his harshest critic, Eric, his husband of 20 plus years. Marvin, welcome back to the show. Uh-oh, did I lose you? Hello? Uh, oh, are you there?
I am. You froze or did I freeze?
Somebody did. I did record the entire entry opening, so I'll just say welcome to the show and we'll go for there. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Marvin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be back. It's very exciting.
Yes, because typically we're talking romance and we're talking all of the other kinds of works you've done with a little bit of fantasy and Christmassy and all the other
Mhm.
stuff you've done. And this time around, you've gone slightly down a darker path. Before we get to that, however, why don't you tell
Mhm.
people quickly how you decided to become a writer and now what has been the impetus for you going down this darker road?
I started writing really because I did not see growing up stories that reflected who I was.
Mhm.
You'd see as you're well aware, you'd see the tragic gay characters or the bury your gays
Mhm.
or the very special episode where they dealt with a gay character who then you never saw again.
Yeah.
Um, so
Back in the
you,
closet.
yeah, I mean, and that's really how it was. And even as we got into, the 90s and the early 2000s, you still had a lot of that same stuff. And yeah, okay, there was a little bit more representation and we were starting to hit the mainstream media and get out there. It was still really, really rare. Or you'd get the characters that just were these stereotypes. And it was like, that's not who I am. And I was like, I want to tell stories where the queer community can be the heroes. I want to tell stories that it's not always the people that look like the characters in red, white, and royal blue who are gay.
Right. Right.
You know,
You can
not
have the
these.
Prince Charming, but yeah, I get you. I
Yeah,
follow
yeah,
you on
you're
there.
not, not everybody is the perfect 20-year-old who, has six-pack abs and just looks like they're a supermodel. And it was like, so I focused on characters that were more representative of who the community really is. I
Right.
try and have a lot of diversity. I try and have a lot of people who are people of color, people who are neurodiverse, people who are dealing with mental health issues, people who also happen to be part of the LGBTQ community because we're not, one thing. We're many things. And, as we're seeing now, we're getting a lot of authors and a lot of writers out there writing all these own voice stories, and they're phenomenal.
Right.
And so, so I wanted to be yet another voice out there. And with Golden Hills Haunting, you know, I've always toyed with the idea. Well, okay, I always loved Poltergeist. This- As a kid in 19, you know, great story. But I was like, it'd be nice to see a gay family suffer with something like that. Let's dive into the dark and scary where it's not um and I love this author, and he's brilliant, JP Jackson. He writes
Hmm.
hardcore horror. That stuff will keep you up at night, but it's brilliant. It's beautifully written. However, I didn't want to write a story like that. I wanted to write a story that was a little bit more based in reality and oh gosh, Jeff, don't be mad at me for saying reality. But something that
You
was
know he
based,
listens.
I know he does. That's why I'm like a little worried. But just something that was a little bit more taken from the point of let's assume this is real. Let's assume these things really happen, and let's go down that dark, scary path and have a story. And that's what I wanted to do. So I originally wanted to write something very poltergeisty. But after doing my research and talking to the various people that I interviewed, that was a made for Hollywood movie that does not reflect the reality of the situations. So I just decided, okay, well, since I can't do that, I mean, I could have, but I wanted it to be a little more real. I decided, let's dive into this pool and let's really go for it and tell something that is based on people's experiences, people's realities, people's stories, combined it all in a really dark story, but that still focuses on family, acceptance, and community.
Right. So, and this is not set in the Bay Area, is it?
This
Oh, it
is
is.
set
Oh,
in San Jose, in the Evergreen district of San Jose,
okay.
which is this it's an upper middle class neighborhood,
Okay.
and it is set in what we call an infill lot. So you get a not a huge parcel of property, but a smaller parcel of land, maybe 2 or 3 acres, and they come in, they build 10, 12, 5, 6 houses.
Okay.
And so the idea is, well, what if this land was left empty for a reason? What if there was a reason why no one built here? And then you have this developer that wants to come in and develop these lovely, beautiful, brand new, modern 10 homes and include a fabulous park and make a lot of money. And what happens when that things start to go bump in the night? And all of a sudden, all these people are thrust into a world where they don't want to believe what's going on, but at the same time, they have no choice. They've got to face it. So yeah, so it's all very contemporary, all very modern, all very much, Silicon Valley, San Jose. You get all my typical references that I love to throw in there for people. And yeah, you just kind of get to see it from that perspective,
Y-
especially after, oh, go
No, go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, no.
I
Go
was going
ahead.
to say, especially after I talked to, so I had the opportunity to interview local paranormal research society here in the Bay
Okay.
Area.
Okay.
And I also had the opportunity to speak with several people from the community who have had paranormal experiences. And I've also got to speak with a priest and a retired exorcist. And when we think of ghost stories or anything like that, we think of the haunted house, the mansion down the road, the cemeteries, all the typical tropes, right? And the reality is, well, one, Silicon Valley and San Jose really, I mean, okay, we do have a few of those things, but not many.
Right.
So we're all, suburban and modern and high tech. And even with that, these things still happen here. And, there are a lot of stories about the paranormal and how it affects people. And because we're so diverse as a community, we're not all Christian, we're not all, all these things.
There's no
How,
monolith. Yeah.
yeah, how all these people from different cultural backgrounds and beliefs have to deal with these things. And where do
Mm,
they go for help? Because a lot of religions don't believe in the supernatural, which I thought was very interesting. And even amongst Catholicism, there are a lot of dioceses and a lot of churches that you go and talk to them about this stuff, and they're like, "Oh no, that was the old church. We're the new
yeah.
church.
Hmm.
That doesn't happen." And it's like,
Well, that was the whole basis for The Exorcist.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
they
and,
thought because he had the background, and that it was all
mhm,
about psychological, and it was all in your
yeah.
head, or imbalance of chemistry or whatever, rather than dot dot dot.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and that was, and let me just throw some numbers at you, just because again, I did all this research and I had to tell somebody because it's just
I'm going to
it's
collect this for Baz and Vance.
yeah. I mean, some of that stuff, well, because it's really creepy. I mean, and you don't think about it, and it's like here in the Bay Area, here in San Jose, in Santa Clara County, they typically do in 1 year a couple hundred deliverances. That's not an exorcism. That's right before an exorcism.
Mm,
So that can be somebody who has a demonic attachment, a ghostly attachment, something that, and that we're not talking 10, 20, which is what I originally thought. This is in a year, several hundred
mm,
that go through their process. And their process is not just, you don't call them up and say, "Hey, priest, I think have a demon attached to me. Can you help?" They have an intake process. They deal with doctors, they deal with psychologists, they deal with psychiatrists. I mean, so even if the let's say two, 300 is an over exaggeration, even if you have 20 cases, it's incredible. And on top of that, they typically will do about 12 exorcisms a year here.
mm.
And again, this is one county in California, one diocese. Eh, so, you sit there and go, that's again, even if it's not real and people don't want to believe it, even if it's only one person every 2 years, that's one diocese, one county in the United States
And you
or
wonder how
in the,
many others are out there that
yeah,
nobody's talking about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was so eye-opening and also at the same time very scary because you don't realize some of those things that the things that go bump in the night. Especially when we think of Silicon Valley and here we are in technology central and people still have it's not in these dark houses, these abandoned houses or these forgotten locations, these abandoned schools or psychiatric hospitals or hospitals in general. I mean, it could be happening to your neighbors right next door.
Right. Right. And I love that you said it in still in the Bay Area, but and this is something you and I are full in agreement. While we admire the mystique of San Francisco, and because it gets all of the draw, I've been mulling around trying to come up with something that I wanted to play with as a murder mystery. As I was explaining before we started the show, um, I want to set it in Mill Valley because I
Mhm.
find that with all the redwoods and they're all amongst the houses, they're interspersed, and
Yeah.
it leads to that kind of mysterious ethos, that I just think it's worthy of a tale. So it's nice that you're actually spending time in these enclaves
Hmm.
that have a relation to the Bay Area but aren't as well known. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
how did you end up at this specific place?
So for the location, I knew that there were a couple things that I wanted. I wanted it to be set in suburbia because,
Okay.
damn it, I was going to get my Poltergeist movie.
Are you listening, Netflix?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted it to be set in a suburban setting. I wanted it to feel very modern. I wanted it to feel very contemporary. So when I was figuring out the setting, of course, I wanted it to be here in San Jose, just
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I agree. San Francisco gets all the love,
All the
and
glory, yeah.
it's like, I wanted it
And
here.
I think that's partially because it's been done so much, people don't have to explain San Francisco.
Right,
You understand it. People have watched all these shows and movies and stuff, and so it's like New York. You don't have to explain New York. But
right.
again, like you and I say, that's great, but just outside of that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So when I go bike riding, I go into this part of San Jose that's called Evergreen Valley, right? And it's these homes that were built probably from the 80s forward, late 70s, eight to now. Relatively new-ish community. Um, and so you see all these infill lots. That's what I call them, infill lots, right? So you get all these places that the farmer finally sold their last
Right.
acre
Hmm.
of land, and I was like, okay, I found a location that I could create this little community and have it set in the bigger evergreen community. So it's not a it you couldn't look for it on a map and say, "Oh, this is where it is," right? You couldn't find those houses because I didn't want to do that to any neighborhood.
Right.
Um,
Suddenly millions of tourists are walking around.
yeah, right. I mean, that would not be good for anybody. But I placed it, near some of the things that I knew that it needed to be placed near. So there's a creek. So there's a creek there. I put it, walking distance to the college, walking distance to the brand new school, that was built probably in the last 10 years. A short walk, short drive to this little town center that they created, with all these little restaurants and coffee shops and a few stores and all that. So I kind of I was like, this is the perfect setting for this. Plus, it also is the neighborhood that I grew up in when I was young.
Right. Right.
So it was like, okay, I know exactly where this is. I know how this can work. I know what's around here. I know the history of the area, which also plays into the story because as you and I have talked about, especially when it comes to local history here in the Bay Area, a lot of what happened here was done to the indigenous folks who lived here, not by the white man, but by the Spaniard conquistadors. San Jose's got was one of the first cities um, created by them. We've got one of the oldest missions,
Hmm.
and those beautiful missions were built by native slaves.
Yes. Who were often very mistreated.
Oh yeah, yeah. There are some places that have unmarked graves filled with thousands of Native Americans,
Hmm.
indigenous,
It's a
First Nation
very
people.
dark story that still isn't told.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to include that because it's very important. It is a very important part of history that needs to be told. I am not a First Nations person, so I can't tell the specifics of the story, but knowing enough of the history and doing the research, I
Hmm.
know that there are things that happened that,
Yep.
it's like, okay, these are things that are real. These are actual events that occurred. These are actual massacres that occurred. So, it was important to make that distinction and call that out. And I do, I
Hmm.
call it out in the book. And I have um, a mention of a character that jumps into this book who people might recognize from a former book.
Dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I want to know who's the Carol Ann character and who is the Beatrice Straight character.
So the Carol Ann character would be the couple. So Kyle and Alejandro's daughter.
Okay.
She is 12 years old-ish. Um, and she came from an abusive, her father, her mother never knew the father, but the mother was very abusive. And she got put into foster care, and Alejandro and Kyle adopted her.
Okay.
And she is in, weekly therapy, dealing with the trauma of
Oh
her
wow.
youth.
Hmm. How old is
And
she?
about 12,
Okay.
about 12 years old in the story. So she doesn't get sucked into a TV. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
I
we all
wanted,
can't visit TV land.
yeah, I those are kind of the tropes that I was like, no, okay, clearly I can't do that. I was told I couldn't do that. So I was like, fine.
So she's in a cupboard. Oh wait, no, that's Harry.
Yeah, yeah. So she's kind of the Carol Ann character, the kids, right? She represents the kids who are having to deal with this and who have, I mean, how does a 12-year-old deal with this, right? And on top of dealing with her neglect and the abuse that she got from her mother, so they have a poor psychologist they're working with that may have to, poor thing, she's going to need therapy after dealing with some of the stuff that happens to her. Um, but so yeah, so that would be kind of the kid character. And there are other kids in the neighborhood that also are affected by what's going on. So it's not just one family that's dealing with this. It's the whole, all 10 houses, specifically
Mm.
for 5 houses, 5 or 6
To
houses.
varying degrees, or are they all hit like en masse?
So so in the neighborhood there are 10 houses. And within that little community, there are 7 families that are being tormented by these evil spirits. Um, Not so much to lesser degrees, but because we're not following them, we don't know exactly
The
the depth,
specifics. Okay.
but we do know from what we're seeing and because they're finally at one point when the whole neighborhood gets sick, they think that it's a new pandemic,
Hmm.
and they commit, and ambulances are there, fire trucks are there. Then the media shows up, and everybody's like trying to figure out how all these people got sick, and I mean really sick. And that's when they all start realizing that, and they start talking. They start coming together and talking and going, what's going on? What's happening? And they kind of start sharing the stories. And you have some people who flat out don't believe it, who think that all these people are just hysterical, and who are still living there, and they just refuse to believe that the ghost biting them on the nose is real. And then you have other people who are trying going, where do we go? They have, the police are coming out multiple times to break-ins, to, this mysterious illness. They have the fire department there, ambulance, paramedics there. And finally, one of the police officers looks at them and says, we can't help you.
Mm.
We we can come and address the fire. We can come and address a possible breaking and entering. We can, those are tangible things. But
But the
with what we're,
ethereal, yeah,
yeah, with what we're seeing and
what you're
what
explaining
they
to
them,
us, yeah.
yeah, and what they've experienced. Because you had a couple of these police officers who show up to help at some of these times, and they get attacked. They can't explain it. They can't go to their bosses and say, yeah, this shadow that was on fire burst through these doors, attacked me, caught me on fire, and then vanished.
Right,
Who's going to believe them?
right.
So you have them who are sitting there going, we can't help you. And then you have the neighbors going, okay, well, what do we do? Who can help us? And so one of the characters, who actually is one of the police officers, she finally says, contact this group. They might be able to help you. And so that's what they end up doing. And then, of course, before things get better, things get worse.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So is there a Beatrice Straight character with the flask and the
So there is, she is, not really the flask, but she's the police
I'm just
officer.
trying. I'm identifying so people who know the movie will go, "Oh, okay, that's who we're talking about."
Yeah. So there's two. So there's the police officer, the main police officer who tries to help them, and she's part of the Paranormal Research Society. And she's like, look, this is the group I work with. Can't promise anything. They may help you. So they're like, okay. And then the main person who would be the Beatrice character, right?
Hmm.
Uh, he comes over. His name is Lloyd, and he's a is it Lloyd? Oh gosh, now I don't remember his name. Oh, but he
He was
comes
taken
over.
by a ghost, and we don't know where he is at this point.
Yeah, yeah. I could look him up, but he's the head.
I'll put the correction here.
Yeah. So he's the main researcher of the group, and he comes and he's like, okay, we're based on what we know and then what they see, he's the one that comes to help. And then while this is going on, one of the neighbors who's very religious calls the Catholic diocese and says, can you help? Well, a priest comes and to do a blessing, and the two groups collide. They know of each other, but they don't necessarily like each other.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden they kind of realize that, okay, we've got to work together to help these people. And so yeah, so you kind of get you get a mix of the characters from Poltergeist. They're not the Native American shaman who was in it. They're not Tangina who's in it.
You're right.
But you can sit there and go, that's kind of that character, and I see there, okay, there's sort of that character. So yeah, there's going to be some similarities there.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So
There's no
so
swimming pool thing either.
a soupçon of poltergeist, but not the main
Yeah,
culprit.
yeah, not a full ripoff.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
He's like,
the only reason I asked that is because I used to work for a financial services company, and I was their system admin, and I had a machine that was for a part of their company, and I eventually called it Carol Ann because no matter how many updates or things that I would do to keep it up to snuff, she and I literally it's Carol Ann, things would get uninstalled, things would get like just on its own, it would just, I'm like, I know I did this 15 minutes ago, what the hell, so we ended up calling that machine Carol Ann. so
mhm.
so I understand how these little permutations can enter your life and you're like
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that's very funny is they have a term for that, and it's an acronym, and it's what do they call it? JTT or JOT, JOT, right?
okay,
Just one of those things,
oh yeah, there you go, there you go.
and and they know that they believe that it is PK related.
Hmm.
Um, because they actually asked when I was doing the interviews, he was like, when your computer doesn't work or something happens, what happens to you? I said, well, you get frustrated, you get annoyed, and it gets worse and worse. And he says, exactly. He's like, it's your energy that's, freaking these things out. And he said, we document hundreds and hundreds of cases of this every year. This is not, and it happens to everybody. It's these small little things. And yeah, okay, there's things like power surges and stuff like that. But when people sit there and go, I don't understand why my computer, or Carol Ann in your case,
Yeah,
is doing X, Y, and Z, and a lot of, according to the one researcher, he was like, that's us. That's just because we're getting frustrated. We're feeding into it. Our anger, our frustration, our negative energy is, you know, affecting these electronics. So I thought that was really interesting. It was like,
yeah, no, it's great.
I was like,
I'm
okay,
glad
well,
you
that
tied
kind
my
of
little
explains
story
it.
to what you were talking about. So, what has
Yep.
been probably the most surprising thing about your research that really kind of blew your mind and maybe gave you the heebie-jeebies?
Well, finding out the sheer number of events that do occur, that was one of the things. And when I interviewed the exorcist, we spent probably 3 hours together, talking, and him sharing. his stories and his experiences, and then finding out the 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 demonic part of it is terrifying. Even if partially any of it is true, right? You
Hmm.
have these beings that, for whatever reason, love to torment people. Um, so that's the given. And that's the fear factor, right? In and of itself. But the big thing that really I found the most upsetting and the most really kind of the scariest was what people will do to invoke these creatures. And it's not something that we typically hear about. It's not something that we typically see. There are people who will do in-womb satanic baptisms.
Wow.
And it still just is very upsetting to even think about that there are people who would do these things to people. Um, and to people who aren't even, born yet, right? Whether or not whether where you fall on that spectrum of if it's a child, if it's not, irrelevant. The fact that you would, torture a woman with doing that,
Who's that?
um,
And let's be honest, women who are pregnant feel quite vulnerable during their entire pregnancy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's perfect fertile ground for
Mhm.
that kind of thing to happen. And now you
Yeah.
add on top of it all the political strife that's surrounding, childbirth, and these women are dealing with some really hardcore shit. So,
Oh
you know,
yeah, yeah. And so so you have that, and that was really um creepy and upsetting. And that was something that, I'd never thought about. You have, I didn't realize, and it was, of course, one of those things that, of course, looking back, you go, oh, well, yeah, that totally makes sense. These things can't typically come in without a doorway, right? Without being welcomed in some way. And a lot of it deals around like addiction, abuse, mental health. And a lot of it deals with, they find that, 8 out of 10 cases relate to sexual abuse.
mm,
And that it's not so much what these the demonic forces or these evil spirits do, or whatever, assuming you believe in that, do. It's what we do to each other to get these things.
mm,
And that, I think, when I left, that to me was the most upsetting, because in my mind, I always believe that good overcomes evil. That's just how I live my life. I have to believe that good overcomes evil. Given all the terrible things that happen in this world, it's the only way I can reconcile it in my brain. Um, and to see that people do these horrible, awful things to other people that then cause these other horrible, awful things to happen,
yep,
that to me was
the most
really kind of,
horrifying.
yeah, that was kind of the most horrifying. Because, okay, yeah, we see a little bit of it in movies and stuff like that. Oh, they do the pentagram, and they, do these dark rituals and stuff like that. We don't realize how dark those, because they don't talk about how dark those rituals are until you actually sit down and talk with like, in this case, a former exorcist, because he went into some of the really dark details. And there are things that he shared that are just not appropriate to talk about even here, like on this, with you guys. Just because it's dark. I mean, it's really, people are twisted. And I
Hmm.
don't think we realize quite how twisted they are until you start diving into some of these things.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that, like, Freddie Feely, who has been on the show several times,
Hmm.
he wrote a lot of horror and stuff. And one of the things he put in my head is the best way to scare people when writing this stuff is to do it with absolutely normalcy, and have it be very quiet and but repetitive. And it's the repeating of these things that slowly build that. And it's something as simple like you close a cover and the cover doesn't always latch or doesn't
Right.
always close. It pops back open. Little things like that that
Hmm.
seem negligible,
Right.
but actually are signs of other things to come, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And and it doesn't have to be fantastic. It doesn't have to be like Sixth Sense, where she comes back in and all the cupboards are open. It's
Right.
subtle. It's very insidious. It's subtle,
Hmm.
but it's the threads of something's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. In the story, I have a scene where the main character, he puts down his keys, where he always puts down his keys.
Right.
His keys are always in this one spot. That's where he puts them, as we all do. We all
Hmm.
have that
Hmm.
one spot that we put our keys.
Yep.
He goes back to get them. They're gone. He looks for them, can't find them. And he, thinks that his daughter is playing a game with him. He thinks his husband is playing a game with him. His husband comes in, and of course he's getting angry because it's like, I can't find the keys. Where are these keys? I need them. His husband walks in and says, "Your keys are right where you always leave them. What are you talking about?" And sure enough, he walks over and there are
They're
his
there.
keys. And he's like, and of course he's thinking he's going insane.
Right.
But yeah, it's like you said, with like what Freddie does, it's these small moments that our logical brain says, I
Oh, it's
overlooked them.
that. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't
Couldn't
see
see
them.
the forest for the trees.
Yeah, yeah. But yet the reader sits there and goes, no, I already know what's going to happen. No, this is the first sign. Get out, get out, get
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
get out. Pack up the family and go. Because, that's what our logical brain tells us to do when we're dealing with these things. It's like, I would never stay there. I would be the first one in the car and leave. Would you?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, they think about it, because if you're moving into these places, and if you bought the property, you have a solid investment. And
Hmm.
so your logical brain says, I can't walk away from this because I will be in huge financial straits, not to mention living situation could be really
Hmm.
screwed up. So you think, how do I deal with this?
Hmm.
Because so much of me is wrapped up in what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether you, and like I said, you're right, it's the logical arguing with what you're going through emotively and
Hmm.
spiritually, or what have you. And if you're
Right.
neurodivergent, if you have anything else going on in your life, this complicates that and muddies it
Oh,
even
yeah.
further.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And that was kind of the thing that, I wanted to hit on. When I dive into mental health with any of my characters in any of the books that I have, it's always, I don't dive deep because that's not, those aren't my stories to tell. But in this case, I knew the daughter, she came from an abusive background. And so I had to have her in therapy because that was the right thing to do
Right.
for the character. And I
Right.
think that any loving parents would do that.
Right.
So the fact that she's dealing with past trauma and all those things, it needed to be addressed. And it wasn't there's no shame in it. Nobody judges her for it. It's just, okay, yeah, this is what you're doing for you. And family's totally supportive of it. And so that was kind of how I wanted to show that, because it was like, yeah, we need to kind of show these things and realize that it's okay.
Right.
There's no stigma with it.
Right.
When you need help, you need help. And that was kind of what we did. One of the things, to jump back to what you had asked earlier about, that was kind of the most, it's not the most creepiest, but it was kind of something that was very fascinating, was to learn that demons are very litigious. So you have to, why exorcisms or why deliverances don't always work is because the demons know the rules, and they know the rules to the T.
Right.
So if you don't say something correctly, if you don't do something correctly, they don't have to listen.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was very interesting because both the paranormal researcher and both priests said the exact same thing. The paranormal researcher doesn't believe in demons, but that's fine. But he did say, when they're dealing with harder spirit, the more troublesome spirits, he says, yeah, you have to know exactly what you're telling them. And you have to exert your dominance over them. And the priests were like, yeah, we have to, when we do these things, we have to recite what we're reciting 100% accurately. We have to, do these structured ceremonies exactly as they are done, because that's the only way that we can get rid of them. And I thought that was really fascinating. It was like,
Hmm.
okay, that makes sense. It's like, all right.
Well, you also think back to even the trope of the devil's contract. So
Mhm.
that's the whole idea, is
Yeah,
that even Satan has to play by the rules, even
yeah, yeah,
and so it's that's kind of and in fact that's where he gets his advocacy, is that the fact that he's um trying to always subvert the rules, trying to figure out ways to get around them so he can create his little mayhem. And that's kind of part of the game.
yeah.
And although I don't want to necessarily belittle it by saying game, but you get what I'm saying, where that's kind of
No,
the
honestly, that's a perfect analogy for it. I mean, it's not it
it's a strategy.
it is a strategy. It is they know they've had millennia, right, to know these
Cultivate this.
things.
Right, right.
And one of the best analogies for it that I thought was really cool is it was like within the universe, we have the rules of physics, right? You push a ball in one direction and it's going to go in that direction until something acts on it. Then pushes it, changes it, whatever, right? Gravity, all that other stuff. It's the same type of thing with them. They, you can go in and, you have to enact something on them to change their path, right? So it's not necessarily like you're not going to win. You're not, vanquishing them. You're, basically you're getting them out of where they are and kind of hoping that they don't attach or get connected to something else, which given our penchant to torture people and to do horrible things to one another, it's easy for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, we're running a little long here, so in the interest of time, is there anything I didn't think to ask you about the book that you want people to know?
Just know that even though this is a fictionalized story, everything that is in the book is based on reality.
Okay, excellent.
There, it is,
If that doesn't
yeah,
give
it
him
is
the
one,
heebie-jeebies, I don't know what will.
yeah, it is one of those things where, yes, okay, author, get
Right,
it.
right,
I get to do things that may not be 100% like, that, okay, that is based, yes, okay, this happened, but it wasn't like that, right?
right.
So I would never say that this is based on a true story. It is based on all the information that I collected from all the different people that I interviewed. So everything in there is based on something that happened to people, which to me was very important to show.
Excellent. Okay. Well, you ready for this year's Get to Know Yous?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in this year of diving deeper, what is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Well, you saw it. I drink water. I don't
Yay!
I don't drink,
Hydration.
yeah, I don't drink coffee. I don't drink soda. I drink a lot of water. So when I'm writing, I am drinking lots of water, which means I always have to get up and go pee.
Right. And as we age, that happens a lot more.
Yes, yes, it does.
All right. What books did you grow up reading?
So a lot of the books that I read so mostly what I read was in school. So I read a lot of literature. So I
Mhm,
read,
mhm.
all the stuff, all the required
All
reading
the
at the
classics.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't start really reading for enjoyment until later, and that was Stephen King, Anne Rice, Alice, well, Alice Walker was part of kind of what we had to read in school. Kim Stanley Robinson, all those. I loved the sci-fi stuff. I loved the Stephen King stuff, even though I loved the sci-fi stuff more.
Okay. Well, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Oh, that's easy. That would
Yeah.
be Eric. Yeah, He reads everything. He tells me if it's any good or not. He
The
tells me
only reason I gave you that look is because there is only one right answer.
there is only one right answer. So yeah, so it would be Eric. He
Okay.
really is. He and he'll flat out tell me if he doesn't like it.
Yeah. Well, when there's some of your harshest critics, but I think it comes from a place of love. They don't
Mhm.
want to see you fail.
Yeah.
So they're going to tell you exactly what they think and feel about it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And that's what I think as authors with our partners, that partnership is really an excellent tool to use
Mhm.
because your partner, if all things being equal and they still love you, they're not going to want to see you fail. So they're going to say, hey,
Right.
this is my red flags. Pay attention to
Yeah.
these, see what you think, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you're
he even
absolutely
has
right.
his favorites. He's got
Mm.
his two favorite books. He's like, Tad. He loves Tad. Tad is if anybody were to ask him, he would say, Tad is my favorite book that Marvin has ever written. It is my favorite book.
Yeah.
And he's even like there's a couple of short stories that he really loves. He loves Thanksgiving pie. Another one that he just adores. He's just like, oh, Thanksgiving pie, it's such a great story. Meanwhile, I have all these other stories. I'm like, can you talk about these other ones, please?
Back catalog,
Yeah,
back
got
catalog.
that right.
All right. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Yes.
All of the above,
Yeah, yeah.
with power
So,
naps in between.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I don't like to get up in the morning, early in the morning, but I end up getting up early in the morning. And then at night, if I've got uh,
If you're in the
uh,
groove.
yeah, I can stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning writing. So,
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. All right. What's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
we love, well, big obvious clue up behind me. Winnie the Pooh, but we do a lot of Disney stuff. And so we travel a lot. So we'll go to Disneyland, we'll go to Walt Disney World. If it's Disney, we try and go.
Okay. All right. Well, has writing and publishing novels changed the way you see yourself?
Yes and no. Yes, in that it's like being a published author is kind of like something that I never thought that I would ever do. But at the same time, being a not so successful published author, it's kind of like, nah, that's just
Well,
sucks.
and I
Okay.
think that's part of the thing too. We as authors have to acknowledge that because of self-publishing flying as much as it does, which is great. There's, that to a degree, there's great that there's no voices being gate kept like it used to be. But at the same time, it also means there's a floodgate, and you're
Yeah.
one of the fish in that floodgate.
Yeah. And now with AI,
Yeah. Oh, I
all that,
know. Yeah.
yeah, all that AI stuff, it's like you're no longer a voice in thousands. You're a voice now in millions.
If not billions. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can scream at the top of your lungs. Very few people are going to hear you.
Yeah, no, exactly. All right. If you were to write a spinoff about a side character, which one would you pick? Choose
So
amongst your
this one,
children.
hmm?
Choose amongst your children.
I know, right? Um, well, this is an easy one because I've already people are would love me to do it. Victor Ray from My Calling series. Everybody loves him. He's the dark vampire that people just love, and it's like even after doing Golden Hills Haunting with as dark as it's got, I still don't think I can go dark enough to do
To
Victor
equate that.
justice. Yeah, yeah. It would almost, JP Jackson or Eric Ronan or Freddie, right? They would have to do it because I don't think I could go dark enough.
Excellent. All right. Well, have you ever traveled as research for a book?
So yes, I travel, but not necessarily for research of the
Because
book.
that would be
However,
outside. That would be outside and down the block.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. When I'm on my bike, yeah, I'm traveling all over the place. Um, and those places end up in my books. But yeah, so I do a lot of the places that we go have been mentioned in my books. So yeah.
Okay. All right. And finally, how do you celebrate when you finish a book? Or do you?
Um, so when I finished a book, like when Golden Hills Haunting was finished and released, we just went to dinner.
That's
It was
nice.
just like, yay, it's done, hooray, and look, I
That's
have
nice.
it and all that. So, but yeah, I don't do any big celebrations anymore.
Yeah. Well, that you do what you do.
Mhm.
Sometimes this authors just say, "Well, I start a new one."
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And the thing is, you got galleys and editing going on. So even if you start a new one, you're still, it's always this revolving door of stuff.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
No rest for the wicked, as they
Right.
say.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, you made it through this year's list. Bravo.
Yay.
So, what have you got going on that's coming up that you want to talk about, and where's the best place for people to find you?
So people can find me so I have my Facebook page, which is author MDU, X. Yes, I'm still on X.
We still call it
Um,
Twitter. We don't want to give him his ex.
yeah, I call it Twitter too, but I figured, I would just say X just to be polite.
Up with the
Um,
kids.
yeah, yeah, and Instagram. And all those are some variation of writer MD New or author MD New. And then I have, of course, my website, which is mdnew.com. Which I encourage people to go to because I do have a blog there and I have all my books listed there, and you can support me directly there versus going through Amazon or one of those places.
Okay. And are you still doing the stuff with Bakwa or
So I have taken a step back from Bacqua.
okay.
Um, there are still some things that I'm doing with them, but for a variety of reasons, I had to just kind of step back and reevaluate things and just say, I can't do all these things that I
Yeah.
was doing before.
Yeah. Totally get it. Life inserts itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, that I guess will wrap up this episode. So we would like to thank a okay. We would like to extend a huge thank you to Marv for being on the show. Boy, I'm stumbling through this thing. Fans, come back. No, but thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's always great seeing you guys. I'm sorry we missed Vance today, but getting to spend time with you is great. It's always a joy.
All right, excellent. Well, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists or hearing our thoughts on and entertainment media, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. The show is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.ropepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Oh, what's that?
Closing time.
The bums rush in melody, dear.